Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Maya Herring. I'm the Arton Specialist with the Design and Creative Placemaking Group at the NEA. And I'm so glad that you all are joining us for this activity. And we're excited to present a lot of content and hear from you all as well. I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Kim with LISC.
Thank you, Maya. I am Melissa Kim, Director of the Our Town Creative Placemaking Technical Assistance Program. I wanted to, as we get started today, offer a couple of community guidelines to help us strive towards a more welcoming and affirming convening. First, about your name tag, we invite you to change your Zoom name and include your pronouns. If you wanted to do that, you could go to the upper right-hand corner of your video box and hit rename. Next, closed captioning is available. So if you'd like to turn closed captions on or off, please go to the three dots at the bottom right of your screen and select Show Subtitle. Session presentations will be recorded. Breakout room conversations will not. And we'll be sharing the slides, the recording, and notes from the knowledge we generate in this session here today in about a week or so. And also, we'll be using the materials from today in order to update the Creative Placemaking Toolkit on our website. So please share your thoughts along the way, ask questions. We encourage you to listen deeply, make no assumptions, and to use the chat. Now, please say hi in the chat, write your name, where you're located, and a word describing how you're entering the space today. And as you think about your location, we also offer in the chat a link to a map maintained by Native Land Digital. It's an important reminder that the place we call home first belonged to Indigenous people. We encourage you to visit the website and learn about the lands you inhabit. Now, if you go to the next slide, you'll see our agenda for today. And you can see that it's quite packed. We will start a lot of conversations. We won't finish them. And over the year, we'll be offering more in-depth sessions on partnerships, engagement, and working with artists. We also invite you to continue these conversations with us in monthly office hours. And you can always sign up for a one-on-one consultation. So last bit of housekeeping is that in the chat, you'll see a link to a workbook. Please have it handy as we'll be referring to it from time to time today. And the workbook contains activities that we encourage you to start today and to finish back home with your project team. And now I wanted to introduce a fellow resource team member, Scott Oshima, for a brief grounding activity.
Good morning, sir. I'm Scott. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I wanted just to, we thought similar to how it's helpful in all meetings, to not just jump straight into business, that it's always helpful to do some sort of warm-up, icebreaker, grounding activity. And so I wanted to share one that I learned from a mentor and friend of mine, Nobuko Miyamoto, that we used to do in person. And so this is the first, actually, this is the second time I'm doing it on Zoom, so expect some chaos. But as a helpful prompt, I'm gonna share what we'll do, and then we'll do it together. Okay. Oh, my table's moving. Okay. So I'm don't do this yet, but I'm gonna ask us to do something that is maybe unusual and scary for Zoom, but I'm actually gonna ask everyone to unmute. Yes, it's scary. Don't be afraid. It's gonna be chaotic. So what we're gonna do is hum. So we're gonna hum. And you're gonna hum from, whatever feels comfortable. You don't have to hum. You can always tap your foot or tap your hands, whatever you would like to do to make some kind of noise. And then we're gonna go from or just to even feel the vibrations, right? We're gonna go from very quiet, and I'm gonna kind of show us okay, we're gonna, just very, very quietly, and then get louder and louder and louder, we may end up in a wild Zoom echo chamber. That's okay. And then we're gonna get quieter and quieter and quieter. So as we do it, I think to listen is gonna be the main thing, is to listen to yourself, to listen to everybody in this room, in this Zoom across the country, and then we'll mute again. So here we go. It's gonna be wild. So I'm gonna invite everybody to unmute. If you feel comfortable, you don't have to. Some of us are. Oh, I'm starting to hear things out in the world. Hello. So now we're gonna start humming very quietly, or tapping your fingers or your toes, whatever you would like to do. And then and then we're gonna get louder as I do this. Okay, so start humming. You need to take a breath. Take a breath. Know that other people hear you, the humming. We're warming up our voices. We don't early. Yeah. Oh, let's get a little louder. Take a breath. You can just listen. Okay, let's get as loud as we can. Down. Woo! So now you can all mute. Yes, I hope that you had the chance, in addition to feeling yourself tapping or humming or moving, that you also had, when you took breaths or when you took breaks, you could hear everyone from across the country. And for folks who just joined are probably like, what is going on in this? And to just feel, I think these kinds of moments where you can feel, in your body, just like what it feels like to be working with other people and the kind of collective voice and power of being in the room together. So thank you so much for humming with me and humming across the country. I hope we've terrified all of our pets and roommates and partners and friends and neighbors. And thank you. And then I'm going to share just one more example of a kind of warm-up that you can do, especially with your partners. There are a number of them. We'll be happy to share more examples. But here's another one that's really great, especially as you're beginning to work with your partners, is a visioning. This can be as short and brief as a kind of check-in or a longer process, but even just closing your eyes and imagining, what the more just, equitable, and joyful community feels like, what we're working towards, what it would be like to walk around or to move around in those spaces. And then really focusing on things like the senses, right? What does it look like, smell like, feel like, look, sound like? And using that to ground yourselves before you get to work. So that's just another example, and we'll be happy to share more, but thank you for humming.
Thank you, Scott. So now that we've spent a little bit of time activating our voices and our bodies, let's spend another few minutes focusing our minds. Grab something to jot down some notes. And I just really have one question for y'all in 3 parts. And that question is, what do you want to get out of our time together today? What do you want to get out of our time together today? So think back to when you first signed up for the session. What compelled you to sign up? You must have had a question. What made you think this 2-hour workshop is worth my time? Something else to think about is today. As you enter the space, what questions do you have about our town, about creative placemaking, about your project? One other thing you could think about is, what do you want your project or community to look like in 3 to 6 months? So take a minute or so to just jot down everything that comes to mind. The more, the better. And no one's going to see your answers but you. So What do you want to get out of today? You know, what made you sign up? What questions do you have now? And thinking ahead, what do you want to achieve in the future? Thank you, Ali, for those prompts. And we'll give you like a minute just to jot down some notes. So consider that your roadmap for the workshop today and for your creative placemaking journey. Our intention in the next 90 minutes or so is to offer you a lot of information. It's a mix of information and time to reflect and time to practice. So we encourage you to apply what you do and learn here today, out there with your project teams. And with that in mind, I'm gonna hand it off to Maya.
Hi, everyone. Again, so pleased to be in this space with you all. You are part of an incredible cohort of artists, cultural bears, local leaders, change makers, who are all leading the way to advance arts and culture in your integrated into community-wide approaches to advance positive outcomes. And it's just a real pleasure to be with you today. So I'm with the NEA, I'm the Our Town Specialist, and I'm going to share a little bit about the NEA's approach to creative placemaking in the Our Town program, and then highlight a couple of Our Town projects from your peers. Next slide, please. Okay, so just first, I want to acknowledge that community-based work has been happening for as long as there have been communities, and that this work is long-term and often not linear and may shift along the way. In terms of the NEA getting into this game, a few factors coalesced around 2010 that brought to bear some federal resources and really was able to put the focus on arts and culture as levers of engagement and change at the local level. So part of this was in an effort to respond to the recession that happened in the 2007 to 2009. And the Obama administration sought to advance economic recovery in American communities in a variety of ways. One strategy included supporting increased appropriations for the NEA. And this allowed the NEA to think about new ways to engage with the American public. So in 2010, NEA released a white paper by researchers Markson and Gaudwa called Creative Placemaking. And this white paper really documented sort of 2 decades of what American creative placemaking looked like, drawing on case studies and research in talking about creative initiatives and how they were animating places and sparking economic development. So at the same time, the NEA piloted a grant program to support place-based work in partnership with our Mayor's Institute on City Design initiative. And so following the kind of information that was learned from that and the success of those efforts, in 2011, the then NEA chair, Rocco Landsman, who was a former Broadway producer, announced the NEA's Creative Placemaking Grant Program to be called Our Town. And that is named after the famous American play by Thornton Wilder. The NEA's approach to creative placemaking aimed to just really ensure that this wasn't siloed and that there was support through a 3-pronged strategy: grant funding for programming in communities through the NEA's Our Town program was one leg. Also, collaborations with other federal agencies to break down those silos and jointly work on interrelated challenges that were faced by communities was another leg. And then the third piece was really looking at funding that wasn't sort of hamstringed by federal regulations. And so convening leadership from foundation partners and the formation of Art Place America was the third leg to just try to seed that creative placemaking investment in ways that, again, were free from that federal regulation piece. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what makes our town distinct. So the first distinction is that we require a partnership between local government and a nonprofit entity. We see committed collaborative partnerships as necessary to ensure that expertise can be brought to bear on the project. The community engagement with stakeholders is strong, and that policy barriers are minimized. And to demonstrate that engagement of local government, we've asked for a letter of support from the highest ranking local official. Other partners are strongly encouraged. And of course, we want to see that arts and culture or design expertise is present in the partner makeup. And the second really distinction with the Art On program is around our systems change orientation. So systems change is the North Star of our program. We understand systems change to be increased integration of arts, design, and cultural strategies among local cross-sector partners, leading to economic, physical, and social change in communities. More plainly, that artists, cultural bearers, arts and culture are sustained and engaged in the community and resourced over the long term. Our aspiration for this program is that through the course of your Our Town projects, that you all are beginning to make headway towards these goals in ways that make sense for you and your communities. So let's talk a little bit about what Our Town is. As you all are aware, this Our Town is a grant program that is done through a competitive application process. We provide one-to-one matching grant awards from $25,000 up to $150,000 for 1 to 2 year projects. We fund in communities of all sizes and for distinct project activities. So far, we've had 12 rounds of grants in this annual program. 677 projects across the country have been funded, and that's about $48.5 million that's been invested in these projects. Our portfolio tends to be quite competitive at the NEA, and we're typically only able to fund about 20, maybe 30% of the applications that we receive. What's wonderful about the portfolio is that we fund a vast range of projects. The partners that we see coming to the table are really unique and lots of different configurations in both what projects are going to do and also who's at the table as part of that. Excuse me, certainly, arts engagement are some of the things that we fund, and sometimes that might be an artist residency or festivals or performances, something that's temporarily activating a space, a creation of public art. We also fund cultural planning, which is about cultural district planning. It's also creative asset mapping and other types of activities. We support design projects that are looking at the design of a cultural facility, for example. And also, we fund projects that are seeking to enliven the artist and creative industry. That might be artist professional development. So to find out more about the specific projects we've supported, you can visit our website at at arts.gov to view recent grant awards, or you can peruse our Exploring Our Town case studies. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that right now. So over time that we've had this portfolio, really intentional work has been done to understand what this work looked like in communities and to really assess the critical components of success. So in 2014, as I just mentioned, we released the Exploring Our Town that's offered case studies from 70 different projects and NEA investments and demonstrated both the range of communities that this work is happening in and also that the types of projects that we were seeing and were being carried out. And we're able to show through that it wasn't just happening in urban centers, that in fact, this work is thriving in communities of all sizes, in tribal, rural, and suburban contexts as well. In 2015, as part of the Our Town portfolio, the NEA began funding work under the knowledge building category. And this was aimed to build and disseminate creative placemaking knowledge more broadly. 44 projects were funded under this initiative and have brought to bear a wealth of resources for the field. A few examples you guys might have seen or be familiar with are one, a Springboard for the Arts, created the Handbook for Artists Working in Community. The Trust for Public Land created their field guide for creative placemaking in parks. A Blade of Grass, working with Animating Democracy, created the Municipal Artists Partnership Toolkit. And Smart Growth America looks at arts and transportation and that intersection and have put together a bunch of resources around some specific projects there. This knowledge building work was further supported by Kresge Foundation for longer, more significant commitments to national network organizations that really built out creative placemaking programs through staff positions and other transformative organizational investments. So in 2016, the NEA published How to Do Creative Placemaking. We hosted a convening in partnership with several of the other partners I've already mentioned. And we also began partnering with LISC at that time to provide technical assistance for our town grantees. In 2018, we saw the results of the Bridgespan field scan, and that work was really, again, supported by several partners, but it also demonstrated this shift in focus of creative placemaking work kind of away from those earlier years of economic development and livability outcomes, and projects that really sought to advance more social change outcomes and civic engagement at the local level. So in 2019, NEA commissioned the development of our theory of change and our logic model, as well as a program evaluation framework that led to thinking about outcomes in terms of strengthening communities rather than the strict focus on livability. And in 2021, NEA commissioned an examination of our town grantees and a selection of case studies looking at a decade of this work and the impact of the Our Town funding. And that work provided some insight into what we're now identifying as early indicators of success related to systems change. Excuse me. All right, so just wanting to share our logic model for those of you that may not have seen it. Again, this was created through partnership with our Office of Research, subject matter experts, key stakeholders, and really demonstrates for the field how we see that artists, cultural bearers, and designers are uniquely positioned to collaborate with cross-sector partners and to envision and connect and illuminate and energize around communities, around challenges or anything that's really going on in that community. So our town theory of change offers this high-level conceptual framework that situates our town as part of a national effort to increase the use of arts design and cultural strategies in community development across the nation. Our logic model, which is shown here, is really about how our town is implemented at the individual grant level, and it reflects the project level context, inputs, activities, and outputs to illustrate ways in which those elements come together and culminate to influence innovation and systems change at the local level. So I want to share with you a couple of grantee highlights that illustrate how all of our town components come together for systems level impact. So the first one is from 2015, and this project comes to us from Austin, Texas. Next slide, please. So prior to this project, the city of Austin pool infrastructure was crumbling. There was disconnects between elected officials and neighborhoods where public pools were located. This project was spearheaded by Forklift Dance Works in partnership with the city of Austin and additional community partners. The project, titled My Park, My Pool, My City, was spawned. Distinct project activities included choreographed dances, community festivals, school-based workshops, artist-led town halls to really engage residents in reimagining their relationship to the pools and parks and to city staff. And the goal was to facilitate this creative engagement to bring attention to the underinvested public pools in Austin. The project led to an increased civic engagement and demonstrated a role for artists in local government and built social cohesion. The project also laid the groundwork for longer-term systems change in Austin by helping to galvanize the community and to spotlight needs for maintaining the pools, ultimately driving a $100 million municipal bond to reinvest in the pools, and also piloted an approach to demonstrate how artists could effectively collaborate with city staff and deliver municipal services. So this approach has actually been replicated in the city of Austin with other projects and in other divisions. I also think it's fair to mention that this grantee has been actively engaging with our TA program, just as you all are doing today. Okay, So moving now to Wenatchee, Washington. This is from 2017. In Wenatchee, Washington, the Trust for Public Land and the City of Wenatchee were awarded funds to support resident-driven creative place-making process for the Kiwanis Methlo Park. This was a 1.2 acre park, and the project featured workshops that included the community in thinking about the design of public art elements and arts programming in this park. The goal was to use these arts as a vehicle to engage the 33,000 residents of the community, which include local farmers, healthcare organizations, and community development stakeholders. Excuse me. The project has really gone well beyond just the space creation and into local stewardship and civic power, which translated into voting drives, food drives, and support for vulnerable populations through the pandemic. In terms of longer term learning, one of the key lessons of this project was that framing the community health on the neighborhood's terms really inspired this innovative partnership between local hospitals and local community experts and leaders. Parque Padrinos, or godparents of the park, a newly formed group as a result of this work, continue to leverage arts and culture within the broader community development process and are recognized as experts in authentic community engagement. What began as outreach to solicit feedback on park design grew over 6 years to have an impact on the city and regional level issues, including economic opportunity, immigration, health, transit, and political power. And this interdisciplinary work also opened doors to additional funding for the project. So just, very briefly looking at the early indicators of systems change that I mentioned that came out of our Town at 10 study and research. And, I think Margy's going to talk about it a little bit more later, but, newly formed partnerships that enhance expertise to increase access to the local community, sustained partnerships that continue beyond the grant period, active communication of project successes that led to integration and sustainability. And we found this to be particularly important in rural communities. Participants realizing the value of creative placemaking then increased those parties' willingness to participate in future projects. Expectations around community engagement helped to ensure ongoing development. Positive reputation, actually, of grantee organizations within the community enhanced their ability to sustain the work. Artists trained in creative placemaking and civic practice perpetuated success of projects. Project outputs that included actionable policy changes influenced the shape of municipal organizations and those conversations that were happening around policy. And then certainly new hires or positions in grantee organizations increased capacity and the influence of organizational norms and policies and practices. So just in closing, I would just want to express that this is a very exciting time for us at the NEA with Dr. Maria Rosario Jackson as our chair. She's the first African-American and first Mexican-American to assume the role of chair. Dr. Jackson is a well-published scholar and urban planner and brings a wealth of thought leadership to this space and how the NEA can further support thriving arts ecosystems and communities across the country. I want to invite you to please check out the recording of our December public offering in which Dr. Jackson shared 6 principles that support her concept of artful lives. And in closing, I want to share just one of Dr. Jackson's principles that feels especially poignant for the Our Town program and the work that all of you are doing in communities. Dr. Jackson says that arts are intrinsically important and most impactful, not in isolation, but in connection to other dimensions of our lives, at the intersection of other areas and sectors, which is exactly what you all are doing. So thanks very much and have a good session.
Thank you, Maya. So one of the pieces that Maya was pointing to was around the NEA's goals on systems change. So we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into that. And one of the things that we'll be using is the workbook. So I want to just point you to that because we'll do a little bit of work in that. And I wonder if Allie, if you could share that link out in chat for everybody, just in case you need a reminder of where that's at. And then thinking about systems change, this is really important because as leaders see the impact of creative placemaking, there is more support for integrating the arts, culture, and design strategies into community planning and development. And our town specifically spurs stakeholders, which could be government agencies, it could be policymakers, officials, foundations, private entities, and more, to increasingly support the arts and culture and design activities going right into that community development. And all of those stakeholders have the power to change the way that they do that work to incorporate arts, culture, and design strategies. So we want to walk you through a little exercise to think about how you can work in the context of a real project on the ground, and just imagine with us as you think about your own project, some of these pieces. And along the way, Margy Waller on our resource team is going to be providing some real life examples that can run tangent with what you all are thinking about for your projects. So here's the first piece in your workbook that we'd like you to think about. And I'll give you a few minutes, and Margy's also going to give an example. But as you look at your project, who and what institutions or individuals are participating in, affecting, or might be affected by your project? So I'll give you a minute, to kind of start writing some things down, whether write in the workbook digitally or if you want a pen and paper. But I want to turn things over to Margy just to give a couple quick examples of what that could look like.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'm going to use a real example, a real life example, and that was a community street painting project where we wanted to make sure that people knew about a pathway between two specific community assets, a park and a public market. And so when I think about who was involved in that project, so first of all, we have obviously our city government and the mayor's office, because they had to sign off on the proposal, the city Department of Transportation and Engineering, who had to approve and work with us on the design and the project. The police department had to close the street and help us with making sure the street got dry on the day of the event, the paint got dry. Then we had a community-based organization, a neighborhood community council. We had obviously the people who manage the park and the public market working with us as well. And then we had our funders, local and national funders. And then we hired, I think, about 15 artists to work with us. So those are some examples of how I might think about all the entities that were involved in a project.
Thanks, Margy. And I want to just give you all a minute to just look through this and jot down a few notes. This can be something that you can use throughout the duration of your project. But what comes up for you? And I'll invite you to place any thoughts in the chat around some of the entities, the institutions, or individuals that you're working with. So I'll just give you a few seconds here to think about this. Okay. And I'll invite you, for anybody who has a few, share who are some of your partners, who are some of the people you're working with, or the folks who might be impacted by your work in the chat. Awesome. Thanks, Larry, Stacy. And as you're working on your projects, you can use this worksheet as a potential tool for yourselves to think about how those who are involved right now could help support your success and your future success, or make it more likely that others on a local level might start using a creative approach to that community planning and development. So that is there for you. Can we go to the next slide, please? And here's another piece to think about around systems change. So specifically for the NEA's Our Town National Systems Change goal, that is sustained support and recognition of arts, design, and cultural strategies as integral to every phase of community development across the US. And you are one part of that larger system across the whole nation of amazing individuals who are working on that on a local level. And on that local level, the success at systems change will make it more likely and easier for you to be doing more of the work that you're doing. So that's the focus level of your projects locally. So consider how your work might contribute to that long-term change in ways that fit your own community context. And next slide, let's just think a little bit about that with regard to your community and your project. What could lead towards that long-term change of local support, recognition of the arts, of cultural strategies, of design? And that includes within community development. But I want to give you 30 seconds to just reflect on this. And I'd like to also ask Margy to just share an example in this context. What does that look like for your project?
Thanks. So in this project, I want to mention one thing that happened actually before our project started, which was a systems change from an earlier street painting effort that made it easier for us to do our project, which was the city adopted its own program so that you didn't have to get actual permission like through an ordinance of city council. You could just call the Department of Transportation and Engineering to get your project started. And then I guess I would add that, the police department, we really needed their help and understanding of the project we were doing. And next time, hopefully that will be easier because they gained some understanding this time. And then lastly, I would say there was a lot of media coverage and so we had effective communications about the work we were doing with artists and community that I think lends support and understanding of the role of artists in this work.
Thank you, Margy. And I'll also note that in the chat, there's some really great examples that all of you are adding to. So please take a minute to read those because it might bring about some ideas for your project as well. And please throw in some ideas that you have or advice that you have related to this topic. So let's take just about a half a minute of quiet silence for you to think about this question. And then I want to ask if anyone might like to offer something up around it. Okay, would anyone like to offer something up that came up for you around that local long-term change?
I'll go.
Great, Larry.
Well, in our project, what we're trying to do, we have a community that's being revitalized. So we have residents who've been living somewhere like myself has been there for 30, 40 years of their life. And we're trying to do memory captures through art. So when we're building like our new hub and things, we have to have rooms with different variations of arts where younger people can grow up and see history. There's so much history and memory in art that you can capture. So we're trying to use different styles from murals to there's like a new intelligent software that you can store video behind pictures that they're using. And I forgot the name of it, but it's really nice. And it's just different mechanisms that the artists are trying to incorporate that the people in this community can always remember, because the neighborhood's looking totally different from a public housing projects to a new revitalized look. And we don't want people to lose the feel of community that they had, that we loved each other. And it was really a tight-knit area. So we're doing memories of seniors and groups and things of that thing that, can keep people's morale and self-esteem together instead of feeling like they're being just kicked out totally. So we're just capturing memories through art. And it's really, really nice to see the different mechanisms art can provide to help keep people uplifted. That's in San Francisco, California.
Larry, thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful example of thinking about how those different components come together. And then also, I think two other really important things that we haven't really talked about that much today, which is around that history and around context. that all relates back to your project. So, you know, as everyone is thinking about who are the players and the people that are involved, also what is that history and that context that is important to the success of your project too. So really appreciate you bringing that up, Larry. All right, and if anybody has anything else you'd like to mention, please add to the chat. We'll just keep a running list throughout our time here. And we just wanted to spend a little bit of time today just starting to imagine what that could look like in your community as we think about that systems change, success, and longer term vision. So we will talk about this more in upcoming workshops. So I would like to pass things over to Margy next to share a little bit more detail.
This is a slide that will illustrate the systems change indicators that were mentioned. It's the next one. Yeah, there you go. That Maya mentioned in the research that was done, looking back at 10 years of grant making, in surveying and getting input from grantees. We learned that systems change was happening, and particularly in kind of the social change area, but that there were some early indicators, things that projects could point to that would show not necessarily that something was happening during their project time, but that it was something that was happening that pointed toward ultimate systems change down the road, 6 months, a year, sometimes longer. And as you think about this, I just want to note that we don't expect systems change to happen in every project during the project grant period, but that things like these early indicators will show us that system change is happening, that there are, as we were thinking about all those organizations that are part of your project, that one or more of them will start to rethink the way that they do their business to incorporate more arts and culture, or to replicate the project that was done, or to provide more funding to extend the project that was done. And that can happen in lots of ways, but we did learn that sometimes these newly formed partnerships, so in my example, the new partnership with the Cincinnati Police Department could expose them to the values of having artists working in community, and maybe they would then want to do more of that work themselves, something we heard sometimes from individual members of the department, or the communication, the media coverage that can lead to more opportunities for funding down the road, just to give a couple of examples. We are going to go into breakout in a moment, and when we do, it'll be a chance for you to have more conversation about this. Admittedly, it's a difficult concept, thinking about, how do these systems changes in systems happen locally, and what might they look like to make sure that there's more arts, culture, and design in community development in your community as a result of the project that you're doing. So before we go into breakout, and you'll have lots of time to digest what we've just been talking about and share more ideas, I want to turn it over to Scott, who's going to share some information about what's coming up next.
wait. Oh, hello from Singles Inferno. I'm Scott, the newest member of Netflix's South Korean dating reality show, Singles Inferno, season 3. I just wanted to let you know that I'm here to find love and meaningful cross-sector partnerships. And if you are too, I hope that you stay tuned after the breakout groups end break for 3 focus groups on cross-sector partnerships, community engagement, and working with artists. And of course, I'll be here talking about long-lasting, meaningful partnerships with our town partners. There was also supposed to be music, but I can't get it to play. I hope you stay tuned, and I'll see you very soon after the breakout groups and break.
Welcome back, everybody. Hi, welcome back. Good talks? Yes, great. So we're going to go on
time. It was fun though.
Okay. Yes, so we're going to go on break, and we'll see you back here at 5 after on the dot. Except, Scott, Michael, and Renee, if you could hang back for 1 minute, that would be great. We can finish them in office hours, in the one-on-one consultations, and feel free to exchange information with each other at any time too. So, and I'm going to hand it off to Scott, who's going to talk about lasting long-term partnerships.
Oh, hello again. It's since yesterday was Valentine's Day, I thought, what better way to frame this conversation than a romance? So hello everybody. I'm Scott Oshima again. I am on the resource team. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I am the former director of Sustainable Little Tokyo over here in Los Angeles on Tongva land. And I currently am about to start working for Floriculture in King County, Washington, where I'll be, embedding and advocating for these same creative placemaking, placekeeping values and strategies, but within philanthropy and grant making. So let's get started on, some helpful tips on a lasting long-term partnership with me, Scott Oshima. So just to share as an example, I was the director of Sustainable Little Tokyo, which sort of similar to the work that you are all doing, was a coalition, a cross-sector coalition, primarily between three very different nonprofits. JACE, the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center, which is obviously arts and culture organization, a community advocacy organization, and a community developer. And these three organizations had all worked together because we're all in Little Tokyo, but they had never really worked so formally on a project like Sustainable Little Tokyo. And so I won't go into too much detail about SLT, but it was similarly about using arts and culture, organizing artists, and doing creative community engagement in order to sustain and protect our historic Japantown and advocate for equitable development. So that's some of the work that I had been doing for a number of years. And I just wanted to share this as some of the story of I think, what you might all be dealing with in terms of partnerships. So of course, and a shout out to Teresa and all the folks here that we've all worked together, many of us. For you, this is your romance. This is between a government agency, a local government agency, and a community nonprofit, one of whom, is arts and culture. Likely, I think many cases it's the nonprofit. But this is, for many of you, this is maybe your first time in a relationship like this. So for some of you, this may be something that you've done a lot, or maybe this is the first time you've done really formal, we're working together on this project, we have a commitment to work on this more than just a kind of community support. So feel free to pop in the chat, if this is your first time dating government, or if this is your first time dating an artist, that whether or not you have experience, every relationship is a new relationship. So I think it's really helpful to start to formalize some things, and to kind of put aside any assumptions about how you work and actually get it down on paper. And so just to share, within Sustainable Little Tokyo, we were working together. We did a lot of work just to build trust, to have coffee, to get to know each other as people. And there were, moments of miscommunication where it wasn't clear who was running what project or how do we make decisions, and it caused tension and conflict. And so we were like, no, but we all trust each other. So let's just sit down and figure this out and get it on paper. And so in the wise words of Beyonce, should have put a ring on it. So we created a document of cooperations, or, for other folks, it could be an MOU, right? We wanted it to just be a document that would really lay out everything. And so I know it's not sexy. It's a lot of words. It's not fun to put together. It looks really boring, but I promise you it will be very helpful. And just thinking forward, or even if you're in the middle of a project, even if you don't have time to do like an actual document that you all sign, still get it on paper. So just to use this as a template and an example, I wanted to share some of the things that you might want to cover in it. So your mission, values, and history. So how did the stars align? You know, what are your values and the mission for each of the organizations individually, and then together as a coalition for this project? Just getting that on paper to be able to point to again. And then, as we talked about with systems change, you want to think about what is the longer term goal beyond the project? You know, why are we here? What is the change that we're hoping to make through this project? And then a history. What's your relationship history? I think we know this, and I've heard this from a number of grantees, right? There's staff changes, someone at the government, you know, your council member changed, and all of a sudden you don't know who to talk to. You get new staff. Having that history and that background laid out in bullet points in detail will be really helpful in being able to remember how this happened and how we got here, but also to onboard new folks and have a document really for yourselves after the project. This is an example of a Asian American Pacific Islander coalition run by National Capacity. We developed a vision and values together as, you know, more than 10 different organizations. This is just an example that we can share that's in the little handbook, guidebook, to show, you know, what the values might look like, shared values. Roles and responsibilities, right? This is like a contract almost, but it's a loving contract. It's a marriage. But right, what your cross-sector group, like you each bring skills and experience, you know, that are going to be really essential. So what do you each bring in every detail? Like how many staff will be able to participate? Who will be helping with what? Who will help with the marketing? Who will help with communications? All of it, the logistics. Your love language. How do you communicate? Not only between partners, but internally. I've seen this in some of my work where a partner organization, we realized the key staff wasn't having conversations with leadership. And so there were disconnects when we were talking to the actual decision makers for the organization. So understanding what does communication look like, and also understanding, you know, even communication styles. And then, which we'll get into a little bit with Michael, community engagement, really thinking about like how are you as partners actually part of the community engagement, not just facilitating it, because as partners, you also are key stakeholders. And then one of the least sexy is decision making, right? This is where we get into fights. So just getting down to the real talk, how do you normally make decisions? And especially we know in government, right? It can sometimes be very complicated. So how do you make decisions? Who does it need to get in front of for approval? How do you deal with conflict normally? And then finding a meeting place. Who wears the pants? Everyone should wear pants. I'm wearing pants right now, even though you can't see. Really thinking about the power imbalances, especially being wary as government, right? You may have power that you're not aware of that will change how people, what kinds of questions people ask of you, or the level of comfort that people have. So how do you level that in thinking about decision making? And then also, you know, of course, you're the primary partners, but community work is very poly. So thinking about all the secondary partners and stakeholders that outside of the formal Our Town partnership that need to be part of that decision-making process. And for us, we even created a very complicated, is it just me or is it getting hot in here? Oh, fire. We made a chart of like, in these cases, these are the decisions that we need to make. Which of the stakeholder bodies and partners and committees and, you know, need to give their check mark of approval. It got that in the weeds, which is actually incredibly helpful and sexy. and then of course, we all are very busy. You know, we all have our own other work that we are doing in addition to this project. And so getting your schedule in place, date nights, right? You're so busy. When do you hang out? So how often do you meet? Who plans it? Who makes the agenda? Who sends out the Zoom link? All of that, getting it decided together. Baby's first steps. What are the milestones and big goals, right? It's this work is sometimes very non-linear. Things will change, but it's always still helpful to have some goal markers, some to be like, okay, we still need to get to this point by next month. And then for me, most importantly, as you can tell, R&R, how are you going to work into the schedule rest and breaks and enough time and getting ice cream and just getting coffee and checking in? Like those moments of building trust and just getting to know each other are as important as those milestones. And so this is a very quick tips on love, but I hope that some of these in thinking about a formal agreement between you will help you all come together like we do in Little Tokyo in Fandango Obon Festival to bring so many people together in a more horizontal, equitable circle to just dance the day away with your projects and make larger change. With that, there's going to be, I want to share, of course, there's lots of amazing resources online from LISC. Ooh, partnership basics. Oh, questions to talk about your values. In addition, there's a longer presentation I did on romantic relationships. You can schedule one-on-one time or office hours with me or any of the resource team members. And then we left you with some questions in the guidebook to help guide a discussion between you and the partners that kind of talks about these same things again. Why are we here? What are our goals and vision? What are our responsibilities? Who, me? How do you make decisions? I don't know. And care and rest and fun as really important things. I know we are short on time, so I'm just gonna, feel free to plot things in the chat, but I'm gonna pass it off to Michael to talk about community engagement. Michael, take it away.
Well, not the first time, but Scott is a difficult and very energetic act to follow. But I'm nevertheless very happy to be with you all today. My name is Michaele Pride, and I join you from the unceded territories of the original peoples of New Mexico and the traditional homelands of the Pueblo of Sandia. I'm honored to be sharing today thoughts on the topic of engaging your community in creative placemaking. This is a general outline, and we'll talk a little bit about creative placemaking as engagement and engagement for creative placemaking. What is engagement? Why does it matter? And how does it lead to systems change? And most importantly, I think today is, what is our role as creative placemaking practitioners in community engagement? So again, I want to point out this idea that creative placemaking can be a key part of a community process, as well as an outcome of your project. This means, how do you act creatively from beginning to end? And what is the difference between community engagement and involvement? There are many versions and descriptions meant to explain the spectrum and range of activities relative to levels of community engagement or commitment. Most of these are based on or influenced by Sherry Arnstein's Ladder of Citizen Participation from way back in the day, 1969. And this, what we want to talk, all of them promote kind of broader agency within community about community development and public decision making. Creativity in the process can help move the needle toward greater community engagement, that from the left to the right of this diagram, and more sustainable outcomes by increasing and broadening participation. So why does it matter to you, to your community, and to your project? Well, more broader and more creative engagement means that more voices can be heard. so we understand multiple and different community needs, concerns, and aspirations. We can then expand and increase the benefits of your project and minimize the harms. And these follow the basic values from the Our Town project. I want to share with you just an example. The partners in this project, which was funded by NEA a couple years ago, the partners in this project included arts organizations, community organizers, healthcare providers, and educators. During the previous engagement efforts, before we got there, of course, nearly 2/3 of people who had participated had above median incomes. Most were over 55. Talk about dating for seniors. Almost none were younger than 25, and only 17% were Hispanic in a community that's well over 50% identifies as Hispanic. And by the way, this is how we like to see city council members participating with community members. That's our city council member on the left, dancing. I didn't get to share with you a video, but there's a link to this video about this project in your workbook. So my group from UNM held a contract with the city of Santa Fe, and we leveraged that contract to engage 9 community-based committed organizations, lovingly referred to as the Midtown Engagement Partners, and they all received stipends from the city and brought their local expertise to this process, which was all about development. So here's an example, or just like a little summary of what happened. Yes, we had 2 signature events that all the partners collaborated to deliver: a block party in October and the Pozolada in December. And if you want to know about Pozolada, you can ask me in Q&A. Of course, you know the challenges of having a contract that started just a few months after the lockdowns into the lockdowns of COVID. But these big community kind of parties were just a little bit of what happened. There were also interviews, workshops in schools, door-to-door canvassing, and then the surveys that we actually co-created together. What was the result? Well, we kind of think this is, from a demographic and statistical comparison, we think we did a great job. Quite a different job, let's say, than the previous engagement period. Over 2,000 people actually responded to our surveys, and over 7,000 people participated in partner activities and events, and over 20,000 were engaged by email, phone, or social media. The results were roughly equal representation across race and ethnicity, income levels, housing situations, and the neighborhoods in which people lived. Let's see, do I have something else to say about that? Nope. Just more about that. One of our partners is actually the Santa Fe Indigenous Center, and helped really lift up the participation and the voices of Indigenous peoples here. So what is our role as creative placemaking practitioners in this community engagement? How can you leverage your position and your project to collaborate with and center community voices? Well, we can help develop creative and fun activities that don't feel like research. You can attract more engagement by more people, including youth, people of color, and other identities that are seldom represented in conventional meeting spaces, like those city council meetings or planning commission meetings that, we kind of all like to hang out on a Wednesday morning. You can use your creativity and your connections within the community. So this is a prompt for you now. In the chat, if you would let us know how you are creating safe and welcoming spaces for community members to engage, express ideas, and share experiences. Got about 30 seconds to do that, I think. Let me check my timer. I forgot to turn the timer on, so now we're completely lost. But go ahead in the chat, please. Share how you are currently. It can be really short, 2 words. Did you have a party? Did you invite people to paint with you? Yeah, activities in parks, meeting people where they are. Thank you, Margie. Where they already are in parks. Chalk art. Oh, did you see that slide? Yeah. To share ideas. Things that are related to play. Come on, somebody else. There we go. Yay. Lots of ideas. Fantastic. We'll get to save those and share. Yes, culturally appropriate food. Definitely. Using the languages that are spoken by those in attendance. These are great examples. Yeah. Oh, creative economy parties. Interesting. I'd go to that. Since I forgot to turn on the timer, I had everything going. But these are some of the promising practices that we came to, or that we highlighted here in our project, that are drawn from some of the literature on community-based participatory research, participatory action research, and self-organizing networks. You see here going where the people are. That Pozolada was a regular annual event organized by one of our partners, and really features that culturally, it was rooted in local culture also because pozole is a signature dish here in New Mexico and is typically served up in the winter holidays. This collaboration with community-based organizations and artists, and really importantly, kind of locating and creating a space and leadership structures. And I want to refer back to Scott's document of cooperations to support authentic community engagement. Yes, we spent months developing that kind of contract or agreement and coming up with ways to make decisions, but it was so important. And I continue to learn. I think that relates to cultural humility. Acknowledging these multiple sources and types of knowledge. I continue to learn from our partners and from everyone, my colleagues here, and engaging with them. But how do you measure it? We use those conventional measurements, but we also talked about how could we measure our engagement itself? And so you see, we had some fun sharing this with City Council about the number of meals were served at this one event, the community filmmakers with Little Globe, how many silk screens were printed, how many people were painting murals, and how many pumpkins were given out. So I invite you to think creatively, not only about the ways that you work, but the ways that you measure it and the ways that you talk about it. I think this is Q&A. And I think that's it, right?
Yes, and we have time for maybe one question.
Great, thank you. See, no questions. Do I have a minute to share some of the outcomes, the indicators of system change?
I'm going to say no.
Okay. I was going to say, we just got additional funding for partners, and they were invited to serve on an advisory committee. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. I have a complex topic in a small time frame. What are some best practices for working with artists in community-focused projects? And I'm going to get into it in 3 general topics: artist selection, helping the artists and community connect, and feedback loops. So you can see Scott, Michael, and my presentations are all kind of touching on similar things, which I'm really excited about. Can you please go to the next slide? So no matter what kind of selection you use, whether it's open call, invitational, directly selecting an artist, there is a great benefit to thinking about why you want to engage an artist and who they may be working with at the very start. Consider how you define community. I like the definition of a group of people with a common denominator. That could be anything from a hobby they all share, a place they live, an experience they've gone through together, cultural heritage. There are many common denominators that bring people together, right? Bringing representatives from those communities into the selection process is key. Maybe Scott has them with his Valentine's Day themed presentation, but I don't know the statistics on blind date success. But communities need to have a voice in selecting the artists that they will work with. The selection group can discuss qualities that they want the creative project to have in advance. And I'm looking around for my copy of Aesthetic Perspectives. I like this document as a guide. Aesthetic Perspectives, it is a free downloadable PDF created by Animating Democracy, Attributes for Excellence in Arts for Change. This is a good grounding document. It talks about different types of community projects, not by media, like sculpture, installation, or a performance, but how the process of creative expression stimulates our senses, moves us, and makes meaning in the world. It talks about values, right? And I love the idea of a selection committee getting value aligned before they begin, such as cultural integrity, stickiness, risk-taking, clarifying the qualities of the creative process you hope to generate, and sharing them with applicants as part of the application would be a great step forward. The selection process is an opportunity to ask artists about how they work with communities, in addition to looking at the samples of their finished artworks, which is, or, reels or printed materials. I know we're not only talking about visual art here. So asking for information that demonstrates how communities were engaged and what they experienced, if that is important to your project. So maybe the reference letters come from community members who worked with the artists in the past, or you ask for work samples that somehow demonstrate the process of engagement and creation. One last thing I want to touch on here is sometimes in my work, I see disappointment if only 20 artists apply for a project. Take a look at the graphic here by artist Christine Wang Yap, who blogs about the outcomes of the calls she applies to. For this opportunity, the odds of getting the opportunity were 1 in 265. That's a little intense, right? I mean, everybody has free will and we can apply to whatever we want to spend our time on. And at the same time, I wonder if we need to be more transparent about what we're actually looking for, given the odds and the amount of free labor by artists applying and the amount of work required of the jury to review, like in this case, 796 applicants fairly. I have to wonder if an open call was the only way or the best way to identify artists who received this opportunity. And finally, I think it's important to consider the barriers to learning about and applying for an opportunity during artist selection. Does an artist need to have a website, or will an Instagram account work? Can the artist apply with a video of interest instead of writing a letter of interest? And maybe think about if your opportunity should be distributed in languages other than English, if it should be in large print, if you should read your opportunity with an audio recording for people who might be living with different vision abilities or blindness. Are you posting information about the opportunity in community settings, or only in places where artists in the know already are looking? And if your application is as complicated as doing your taxes, narrowing it down to the components that will help you pick the best artist for you. You can always ask for more information from our smaller group of finalists. We can go to the next slide. It's time to reflect for a little bit, just a few seconds, 30 seconds, on 2 ways that you might be able to eliminate a barrier in your selection process. We'll start now. You can put it in the chat if you want, or you can just think to yourself. I'm starting the timer. Okay, next slide, please. The next topic I'd like to talk about is getting acquainted, right? So when the artist is on board, spending time talking about their communication styles and preferences, Scott also mentioned this, and those of their key project managers and collaborators. How often do you want to check in? Is it on phone or Zoom? How often do you need to meet in person to really build that collaborative feeling? Does your group really like texts, emails? Are emails in the middle of the night okay? Or do you need specific working hours to be honored? And again, this is for the artist as well as for all the people managing the project. You're going to be working together for a while, and figuring out how to do that well makes sense. Don't forget to ask the artist if they need any accommodations to help them be successful, and discuss how they will be provided. And if anyone on your team has accommodations that need to be discussed with the artist so they can communicate well, let people know about that. Let the artists know about that. Hopefully during selection, you talked about the artist community engagement experience and methods. And when the creative process begins, taking time to introduce the artist to the many layers of community as possible will enrich the artist experience, can create buy-in for your project, and hopefully lead to more engagement. Even if the artist lives or works in the area where the project is located, the artist may not know all of the communities involved in a project. So start with asking communities you're working with how they want to meet the artist. Let them know that this is hopefully the first of many times that they can engage. Artists should be offered help in connecting. It's unrealistic to think that they can do it all by themselves and make the connections you want them to make. Some things that organizations can do to help artists connect are taking them on tours or introducing them to key stakeholders, sending them to local web and print resources, but also, and Michael talked about this, where are the places where people in your community spend time? Should they tune into the local public radio station, join a local Facebook group, attend events at the library, the park, the gym? Another tip that I really like to think about is asking artists to experience places at different times of day. I think it can be really informative and to help engage a wider range of people. An artist working group is a really important way to take the load off of one person being the key connector and the only thought partner. A working group consists of usually at least 3 people who can help the artist connect with the community, navigate barriers, and provide that first round of feedback for ideas before they're made public. It's who the artist can turn to if there are challenges. So lastly, remember, the work of getting to know the community is part of the artist process, and it's work that they are paid for. So reflection time again, next question. So we're going to make this only 30 seconds because I know we're short on time, but thinking about a characteristic in your community that might be hidden, that would be helpful for an artist to learn about, and who could help them learn about that characteristic. I feel the time pressure. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. Feedback loops. I'll try to make this one really fast. So we have time to talk about 2 different feedback loops. One is the working group feedback loop. Remember, that's that small group that artists work with throughout the project. This is where they can workshop their creative projects and get honest feedback about how great it is, how it can be made better, or frankly, if they need to do a 180. Even after you've spent so much time connecting artists and communities, sometimes ideas that are just not going to work bubble up. So here's where you can address those challenges in a constructive way. And I think it's really important to be honest in your feedback, and why having an artist working group that is connected to the community will be helpful. Diversity in feedback can help everyone anticipate why a project is a success or what challenges a creative concept may face. this is where you can come back to this like aesthetic perspectives or the values or goals that you set for your project. Are you achieving what you wanted to? Have the goals for the project change? And that's okay too, but take time to clarify where they are now. So when you do have a project that's ready to be shared more broadly outside of that working group, going back to the artists and the communities you want to engage to come up with strategies for sharing the project and getting feedback that are relevant to the people who will experience the project. Ask the communities what will be most interesting and valuable for them. That should be the first step. Can you be a part of an event they already know people are attending? I don't know, is it a spot in a community festival? Or because of the way approvals work in your community, do you also need to plan on presenting the idea more formally, you know, in a public meeting? So importantly, feedback is not only about the creative concept, the artwork. It's also about, and we all know this, that making the artwork, that process is also part of the art. How is the project working? And don't forget to ask the artists for feedback and advice on what they need if any changes have to happen for their projects to be more successful. So one more reflection, next slide. Has your organization ever received any constructive feedback about what it's like to work with you? And how are you thinking about that as you embark on this project? Well, almost 30 seconds. It was nice to see everybody today. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. Hi, everybody. Jamie Horter again with the Our Town Resource Team. And I just wanted to share a quick process with you that is one framework of thinking around the design process for your project called the design process spiral. And oftentimes, maybe all the times, this is usually not a linear sort of way of working or a model that's happening with your project. A spiral is one way to think about it. The process will ebb and flow and change as you go through it, but one of the most important pieces is that community is always centered. So it may include parts like gathering, spending time collectively imagining, discovering with community, always designing and then refining that design, taking action out in community or with partners, assessing your results, and then continually refining, renewing, or wrapping up. So as you think about your work with the Our Town project, just think of it as a work in progress when it comes to your timeline and your process in general. And then next slide, please. So it might actually end up looking a little something like this instead, which is that your route might take many different loops and turns. It might feel like going around on hills sometimes. It might feel like mountains at other times. You might be looping around and doing multiple steps multiple times. Next slide, and then we'll just look at the whole thing all together. You might find that this is an additive process. In some cases, you might be adding new things, you might be subtracting, you might find that you need to redo things. It'll be unexpected, and that's a natural part of the process. So just keep that in mind as you're moving forward. And the thing that will always remain consistent is that those Our Town components will still be there, which is having city government as a partner and having arts as a component, and then the basics of your plans. So with that, I'm going to turn things back to Melissa.
Thank you, Jamie. We are at time, but we wanted to let you know that there are plenty more opportunities, right, to keep these conversations going. Here are three on this slide right here. We are going to ask you to take a minute to complete the exit poll that Allie's going to put up on the screen. And it should take you about, hopefully, not too long. And then finally, we're just gonna invite folks who can, if they want, right, to stay beyond this formal session. We've concluded the session. And we're just going to keep the room open for like 15 minutes in case folks want to just chat some more. But we ask that on your way out, if you could just check out by letting us know, a word or a phrase or a gesture, right, that indicates one thing that you will do next. And with that, we hope to see you soon. And you're welcome to stay for a few more minutes if you can. Thank you, everybody.